Hello, and good morning. There's been a fair bit of discussion recently on how a whole bunch of stuff works in Formula Front, and I figured, let's go ahead and make a little bit of a guide of sorts. I should mention, I don't think anyone has perfect information on how everything on this works. Personally, I was given a bunch of information by Mr. Azur over on the Discord side of things last year. He seems to be the most experienced in all of this stuff. Apparently he was there back in the old PvP days and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, if you have any very, very, very specific technical questions, you can probably go ahead and direct them to him. Mr. ProCow has made a few discoveries over the last year, and I've been doing the AI tournaments for the last year as well, so that's kind of a rough thing of where all the experience for this comes from. Now, here's the thing. First things first. What I've been noticing the most, just with the first few that ended up coming out with TBM's thing, is this little menu right here. So, the best thing that I can recommend for this, I figured I might as well go through all of this. First off, these should never be anything but maxed out. To explain the limitations of the AI, the thing, for all intents and purposes, can only think about one thing at a time. It might think, okay, I want to go here and do this. It might think, I want to go and hide behind this object. But by and large, it can only think about doing one thing at a time. So, you want to try and get it to go and essentially do that one thing well. You can pull off trickster builds, but they're going to be very inconsistent. So first off, for accuracy right here, typically you want this at least 9 or 10. If you have a radar on the head, you can usually get away with 9. If you've got like a radar on the head and back, you can usually get away with something even more extreme than that. If you've got 2 radars in the radar head, you can probably lower this down to maybe a 3 or a 4, and you should be still pretty well functional. So the more they have into this, I think this is just like a stat dump for all intents and purposes. So the more of what would usually be versus ECM is the better that they're able to locate something, and the better that they're able to go and plan around where that thing's location is. So in this case, like I said, if you give it 2 radars, give it a radar head, give it a good search stat, it will always know where the other guy is, it will always be able to maneuver correctly. There's just no downside to this stat. Now, as far as all of these, even though it says attack or defense strategy, this is more of just a general tendency towards a particular type of maneuver. So, for example, if you max out attack, if you have it for close range, it will typically be pretty decent face hugger. By and large, I mean, it's going to vary, of course, but by and large, that's kind of the thing that they're going for. If you end up going for defensive and longer range, it can be more of what I like to call the White Glint sort of build, the sort of, I'm going to stand over here and plink type of situation. So defensive, how to explain this? It's more of just like moving back and shooting. Aggressive is more, well, attack is just more going forward and attacking. It's not necessarily going to make them pull off any super complicated maneuvers, but it's just going to make them better at their general approach. A good defensive approach, for example, would be, say they're in a fight and they're kind of doing like little tiny movements left and right, and they're moving backwards and they're going behind cover. The attack strategy in this case would just be doing the same thing, like little wiggles going forward, little short hops, and they're going around and they're just going and directly attacking the thing. It doesn't make them necessarily better at attacking from the sides or anything else. There's specific chips that you set up for that. But, yeah, these two, usually you don't end up using them very much. Most of the time, something like this is going to be a good starting point. So terrain awareness essentially lets them know where all buildings are, where everything around them is. It's just a good little way to do it. So we're going to go ahead and keep it on this AI tendency for now. But basically, terrain awareness is just going to make them actually use the map. It's going to make them... They're going to be less likely to get stuck on things. I say less likely. They will still run into things every now and then. It's not perfect by a very long shot. And enemy awareness, it's less about actually knowing where the enemy is. That's actually the search stat. That it's more being able to view opportunities. So for example, if something's out of energy and overheated, they would be more likely to just completely hop on that situation, as opposed to their usual thing of, oh, well, that's neat, they're on fire and completely disabled. I'm gonna go walk to the right for a while and stare at a window. So anyway, that's basically more general opportunism. From what I understand, I don't really see this one used very often. Lower. Go ahead and leave that as is. Now, as far as all of these go, these are a lot more self-explanatory. These actually do a pretty decent job of explaining what they do. In case you're unaware, the line in the middle, you basically have -16 to +16 on each of these. The line in the middle is just a general purpose. They might do it, they might not. And all of these tendencies, just from what I understand, every frame it basically checks what it wants to do. So, so basically, if it wants to dash around, it's like, okay, I like dashing around. I don't like jumping very much. This means that sometimes it may still jump, but it's unlikely to. So all the way on the bottom means that they'll basically always either, well, for the case of these ones, they'll never do it. For the case of this one, they're always defensive, but yeah. For example, if you make them almost never want to jump, if you bring it all the way down to the bottom, they may still jump if they need to get around, but by and large, walk or the dash. Again, there is no hard no on these, so it's not necessarily going to completely block it off, but, for the most part, it's going to block it. If you want to completely block something, though, that's what all of these red ones down here are for. For example, you don't want them to be able to move their legs, you don't want them to be able to boost, you don't want them to use their arms at all, you don't want them to use their insides. Or if you want them to purge something at a certain point. So, whenever they use something up or they feel that it's worthless, they will automatically purge it. For example, if the other guy has no missiles and they have an anti-missile system, most of the time, I believe it's if they have any enemy awareness whatsoever, they will go ahead and purge that immediately because they know they're not going to use it. It's one of those weird examples of them actually putting a smart thing in there. But yeah, generally you can view them as being pretty dumb. Now, chips, you don't actually... with the AI that I mentioned earlier, generally speaking, if it functions, just leave it be. There's really no need to go and put a whole bunch of chips on them. Chips, they don't unlock anything. They don't really, give them their true potential and everything else. Chips are only there for the purpose of making them not do something stupid. So they may make them... They'll basically narrow down their movements into they can only do this thing. So if you want to fine-tune it, that's what these are for. Like for example, Mobility 2 here is one of the most dangerous ones that you can give them. It's the one that tells them to go boost and take a position behind something. Because the AI tends to burn through all of its energy, this means that they may run themselves out of energy and land right in front of the guy if you haven't their energy accordingly. So again, most of these are just, you can't get them to do a specific move. Use these. So, show off. Few that are pretty generally useful. We're going to start off with MOS 3. Personally, I think this is probably my favorite hit and run type of thing. Actually, you know what? As a good baseline here, go ahead and do that. So first things first, we're going to run the fight with nothing. Clear that off. We're just going to go into this. So I've mentioned this before, but the energy for these AIs, you always have to bear in mind the fact that they essentially see the bar as 99% of what they can actually use. That's why you want that bar to be maxed out at all times, because then essentially they'll look at their bar and say, hey, I have 99% of this energy that I can burn through. As opposed to anything lower than that, in which case they might end up just running themselves out of energy. They still might. Bear in mind, they can't calculate more than one thing at a time, so for example, if they're boosting and using a weapon at the same time, or using a laser blade or something, they will only account for one of those things. So whatever was the latest thing that they've counted, that's what they're actually going to... Like right now, it's not counting the movement, counting like, well, I can technically move. Ooh, I also have just enough energy to technically shoot. If it ran low on energy, it would try to do both at once and burn itself. Again, bear in mind that if you're for a heavy energy load right like that, you're having that frustrating issue of them running out of stuff. Why they specifically included a generator in this one. That's basically completely tuned only for output, which is specifically for those kinds of builds. Fortunately, the thing heats up like crazy, but as you can see here, it's got like a sort of mid-range tendency. This is kind of what it's going for. Bear in mind, in most cases, they will always try to lock on to the maximum of their lock. So if you're using the 12 missile lock like this one is, you'll almost never use it unless it's got a full lock, which is pretty dangerous because most AIs will have a missile blocker equipped, which means that it may completely disable their missile lock. And that's just something to bear in mind. If you give it a more aggressive chip, then it will be more likely to fire on it. Most of the time, they will try to go for a full lock. A pretty smart move to limit them to something a little bit more reasonable. As you can see here, they're just kind of moping around. It's doing a pretty okay job, but say I want it to get closer. Say this is not really cutting it. Back here. I'm gonna go here and we're gonna give it the demo. There. If you're wondering on the music from Shock Music, been going and making of E3, not AC3, but just D music in general. I also there. Go confirm settings and same fight again. Over here, do this thing. Up real quick. Forward. As you can see, this time he's going to be way more aggressive about getting close. Copy sword. This will functionally end up ruining his chances of getting any missiles off, but he'll end this a lot better. This is why I consider this chip to be the tendency to overshoot, and unfortunately it does also have a tendency to make them fire on the periphery of their lockbox, which will in fact cause a situation where they end up firing at the ground sometimes. But it's still pretty useful for this purpose. And I can see that chip is run out, so he's gone back to a previous thing of kind of moping about. Go ahead and cancel out of that one. This is what I was telling the guy from the fight earlier today with it was Lilith and one of the cannons. I feel like an a-hole now getting that one because it was kind of my favorite of the two. Okay, so this time we're gonna go for go ahead and go for the M83. This is one of Cow's favorites. This is basically just same thing. You can kind of charge in with all weapons. Now, pay attention to the squares on the bottom right. These essentially tell you the types of things that they're. So this one will tell them, okay, no jumping. You can't jump. You can boost, but you can't jump. So they will not do a hard jump at any point, and will not turn on their EO. So it won't work for one that's EO. Go ahead and put here for comparison. This one is mostly about jumping and movement. It's block use of insides. It technically doesn't do anything for EOs, but it will still use it if it's part of its set there. But this is basically forcing movement and jumping. So like if we go over here, this is also forcing movement and jumping. This one forces boost. So if you see anything that says that it forces boost, don't use it if you're like this one especially. Always be careful with force boost. These, you know, again, if they run low, if they can't get close enough, they will just run themselves dry trying to go ahead and compare the two. I believe I said earlier that their EO, it doesn't necessarily block it. Anyway, they all have some weird hidden properties that they don't. The thing is that there's so many like little tiny quirks still. Like, for example, if you're making a parry build, you're better off going and setting up the chip for cluster bomb, because that will essentially tell them, okay, go hover above this guy's head. It won't necessarily say cluster bomb. You know, hover above their head and fire when. Even though parry blades say to do that, all they say is to get close. Say to get close and the other guy and then fire. Although none of the chips really have a sense of timing. None of the AC have a sense of timing, and none of them have a sense of forward planning. So when, for example, when they're using parry blade, if they use the parry chip, they will get close and they will stab. If, for example, say Mr. Pokey's one, they will get close, and they will Essentially, if they're like a tank and they're really slow, that parry chip is perfectly fine. If they're going and using a blade along with it, still perfectly fine. If they're going and anything else, it will still function, but so AI. Say we want it to be at a little bit longer range, then you would go for Wraith back, this doing generalized ground movement. You got stuff like this. Basically, all your blue ones are going to be super defensive ones. This one is an odd one. It basically makes them hide behind it. This one will essentially stick within weapons. Stuff like these ones that will essentially stop doing whatever it is that they're doing to avoid it come their way, or this one, okay? And you got hard defense, which attempts to just move weirdly. Bear in mind that they cannot understand when stuff is flying. So that means that they won't be able to specifically say, hey, you know, there's a bazooka thing flying. I'm going to move out of the way. They can't process that. Instead, the way that they see it is just going to move around in this general pattern, my current status, and where's the other guy I want to shoot at him. We pull up the other menu. Here. So, if you pull up this menu right here, this up on the zigzag. So he's kind of generally going for long line, staying within. Not really one of the best. Can be potential. Might be build. But if you look at that X, every time that it appears, it's kind of their. So it's what they identify. Every time that there's a red dot, basically that they can identify a missile. One useful piece of information, if you give them the art, they add, or if you have radars that are there, that will cause them to be able to identify them and get out of the way. Otherwise, they will be just as blind to them as everything else. Which means that, yes, they were perfectly capable. The AI is able to dodge. Anyway. Moving on from that, so as you can see here, defensive 2, this is the one where, I believe this is the one where they're just staying within range. Going for like a generally hot. Unfortunately, we didn't get to some of the weirdness of other chips. We'll get to those. What else do we want to cover? So, let's go into tuning real quick. I'm seeing I've seen a lot of people go into tuning for all this kind of different thing, expecting a lot of similar stuff to Last Raven, that kind of thing. Frankly, because the AIs are so bad at actually dodging anything, the best idea is just always put everything. That way they can use their basic armor to... Once they overheat, they're basically out of energy. So, my opinion, 9 times out of 10, just frame parts. Well, better one there. Pretty much any fight between all of these, you'll see a certain group of parts banned. Mostly for that same thing, because completely dodging. You'll almost always see napalm. These in particular, they will fight pretty much immediately, even with one with max cooling, it still makes so big of a difference that it's almost even not even kind of insane. Also, I'm just noticing that it seems like them having issues. Now, not for now. Again, just whenever boosting, always make whenever have a thing that boosts around a lot. Always. Actually, let me go to the assembly real quick. This is the generator I was talking about here. Maximum energy output. If you have energy issues, give them this. Give them the Jirans. If you've seen my Damon build for a little while, that thing will usually get out of the charging state. As far as dealies here, go into the other 10. You've got this one right here. This is very, very, very useful. You got this one here. Mentioning earlier, cluster bombs. Okay. We're gonna go for the parry one. Alright, let's again. We're getting into tendencies. You may notice the AC might have disappeared on the left there. This is primarily due to a hit bug. Don't worry about it. Not important. First chip it's going to go ahead and use is the attack from the sky ones. They're going to get close. Essentially, they are just going to do this little hoppy thing. What this chip tells them is get in the close range and just try to hop up to a little bit above their head level. And so if you've got any kind of close range build, this is usually going to be the good. Pretty much the MOS3 is the one that you want for one don't have armor. If you have ones that have absolute no armor whatsoever, or if you have one flat out tank thing, this is the one that you want to go for, because it will tell them to get into absolutely close range. Now, why am I saying both extremes of the spectrum there? Well, for example, if you've got burst build, shotguns or whatever else, or fingers or something like that, this will end up working really well, and you can probably get close. They generally avoid stuff, and then they go above their head. If they're able to overheat them while they're maneuver, the other guy will be defend himself. However, if you are able to, it ends up working pretty well on a heavyweight. Say something that's different, like Gatling zone. So in that case, they would be able to take just a minimal amount of shots and over the other guy. Tends to work pretty well. A lot of stuff is going to be very variable on a case-by-case basis. So just bear that in mind. There's really... this game goes, because there's so much. Now, here, go to the AI. Let's go ahead and take all these chips off. Show the difference between out. But aside from always having the bars filled up, usually this one, there's really no reason to have all of the other ones down at all. Right here, straight up cheats for these respective stats. Essentially, this will regen energy and at a rate that is functionally impossible in it. These ones right here are going to make them not be retarded when they're staring. Music, why have you stopped? Better. And that it does not exist. That's fine. Fine. One is defensive. Yes. The thing he knows is to. So he's going to do this kind of little backward diagonal thing. He'll still end up getting close at some point, but have a tendency to give a smaller profile to himself. What they were going for is most rifle build, but this won't always guarantee. Either way, being and doing while giving a profile from the side. That's mostly what it was. Bit of lag here. Come on, emulate. So sort of worked, but let's see what happens if we win the fight. Go ahead and switch over that, and we've got a phone call. Alright, back. As you can see, they're kind of going for more of a forward angle type of thing. Again, there's a reason that these two aren't typically very preferred, but it's just if this is the kind of thing that you're going for, it might be a little bit more useful. Most of this guy's tendencies were set close to the middle. Just bear in mind, again, obviously this is going to vary per build. This is mostly for the sake of... Now, as you may have noticed there, because he was a little bit more aggressive, he actually fired his missiles when he was about to lose lock, as opposed to waiting for his full lock on. I believe the attack tendency has a tendency to make that more likely, but I'm not 100%. It's a little bit unclear. Everything is, again, pretty obtuse as far as this thing goes. And the last tendency, this one. Now, I'd like to make follow-ups to this, just kind of based on whatever questions people have. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to let me know, and I will attempt to answer them to the best of my abilities. Goodbye, phone. I guess I didn't need you anyway. Alright. Done. Now he's going for enemy awareness. You can see he's kind of tracking him a little bit better. Whether that's actually helpful or not is unclear, but he definitely seems to follow him more. So if you're going for more of a sniper build, this might be something that's more useful. So everything will essentially just kind of make it a little bit better at combining with something else, and then that combination of different stuff is mostly what's going to be. So, that one's pretty alright. You can see it's making them pretty okay here. So hopefully this was helpful, and yeah, if there's any other questions that you'd like answered, let me know. Good day, take care,